Welcome to today's 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony. If you would rise for our national anthem and remain on your feet for a moment of reflection.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
May we receive today as the gift that it is. May we recognize how uncertain, chaotic, precious each day is. May we focus our energy and our efforts in the service of others. Protect those who protect us. Grant us wisdom and patience and compassion. Amen. Please be seated.
At 0846, Flight 11 from Boston's Logan International Airport crashed into the World Trade Center North Tower with 93 people on board. The last communication from the plane was from flight attendant Madeline Sweeney saying, "Oh my God, we're way too low," moments before the plane hit the tower.
At 0903, Flight 175, also from Logan International Airport, crashes into the South Tower with 65 people on board. Last contact with the plane was from passengers' cell phones contacting their families.
At 0905, President George W. Bush learns of the attack while attending a second grade class reading lesson in Sarasota, Florida.
At 0931, President Bush addresses the nation, calling the attack a national tragedy.
At 0937, Flight 77 from Washington Dulles International Airport crashes into the Pentagon with 64 people on board.
At 0945, the White House and U.S. Capitol are evacuated.
At 0957, passengers from the fourth flight, Flight 93, start to fight back against the hijackers.
At 0959, after burning for 56 minutes, the South Tower collapses, killing approximately 600 workers and first responders. The fall lasts 10 seconds.
At 10:03, Flight 93 from Newark International Airport crashes into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, with 44 people on board.
At 10:28, the North Tower collapses after burning for 102 minutes, killing approximately 1,400 people.
At 11:02, New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani orders an evacuation of Lower Manhattan.
My name's Cadet Ronan. I wasn't alive during the events of 9/11, but both my parents were. My dad, who was a Chicago police officer during the time, was at work during the attack and immediately went home to be with my mother, who was recovering from surgery. 3 days after that, he had gone into a recruiter's office with the hopes of re-enlisting. He had been separated from the Army for 4 years at that point. Growing up knowing this and knowing that he was willing to throw everything aside, his whole career, in order to go back into the Army and continue fighting for our freedom is something that drove me to enlist in the Army and to join ROTC to become an officer.
I'm Cadet Captain Hayes. I'm from MTSU, detachment at TSU. 1911 is a very prominent history in my life. I believe that each and every day I want to commit with service, and this tragedy and events that happened in history has impacted all of us. I currently work at the airport, and so I have security measures I have to take each and every day because of this event, regarding with TSA, regarding with the Homeland Security. So I see a lot of individuals and processes that we have to account for because of the security measures. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cadet Fripp. I was not alive during 9/11, but both my parents were. My mom was in the Air Force at the time. She later, after this, got deployed to South Korea. My dad then got recalled back into the Air Force after this and was deployed to Spain. Later on, he was deployed to the Middle East with the Rangers from like 2011 to 2012. So kind of growing up and seeing their sacrifice that they made, to our country because of this event, really just kind of shaped the way that I walk and carry myself now, and it's definitely part of the reason that I wear this uniform today.
I'm Cadet Graves, and the events of 9/11 made me want to serve my country and defend the freedoms and all the opportunity that we have in America. We are living in the land of the free because of the brave, and I truly believe that. And America is worth standing up for against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And everything that is occurring in our nation currently makes me also want to hold closer to my faith. And it just makes me think that true healing has to come from the one that showed us perfectly true love, and that was Jesus. Jesus demonstrated that for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege to soon listen to a leader, a patriot, who was there with President Bush on 9/11. Roy Sexton, a friend of mine, even though he was misguided enough to graduate from the Naval Academy. A Navy veteran, a retired Secret Service agent, who will share with us today his perspective, the impact of 9/11 upon his duties, as it was his first day as the lead in charge of presidential security, and he was with the president as he became aware. This ceremony is for all of us to remember that there were and there still are people that are willing to die for people they don't know, that are willing to sacrifice everything. We shouldn't have to be reminded to remember that. We should recognize it in our everyday activities as we focus on serving others and providing for our precious families and protecting the liberties that we have. We shouldn't dwell on it, but we clearly need to comprehend that there's evil people in the world. People who try every day to deprive us of our freedoms, to harm our families. We must be aware, we must be prepared, we must remember to serve others. Ladies and gentlemen, Secret Service Special Agent in Charge, retired, and my friend, Roy Sexton.
Well, good morning. As the General said, my name is Roy Sexton, and currently I'm the Director of Security at Alabama Power. But before leaving to join the private sector, I spent 23 years with the U.S. Secret Service, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that today. Now, I used to jokingly refer to myself as the Forrest Gump of the Secret Service. Hopefully that doesn't turn into an intellectual analogy, but kind of like old Forrest, I seem to have been around as a lot of interesting things took place. I started my career with the service in Chicago. And my first boss was a man by the name of Tim McCarthy. And if that name doesn't sound familiar to you, if you've ever seen the assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan, Mr. McCarthy was the agent that spins around, stands up, gets wide, takes one in the midsection. Now, I'll tell you, I've always found that Mr. McCarthy was a good boss. He was a fair boss, but he was not the kind of guy you wanted to give a lot of excuses to. My first big opportunity with the service came in the fall of 1991, preparing for the presidential campaign of '92. I really wanted to be on one of the campaign details. And back then, the reason a young agent would want to get on a campaign detail, first off, it was an opportunity to do what you'd learned in class, hands-on, close-in protection. The other reason is financial. Young agents didn't make a lot of money back then, and there was a lot of overtime on those campaigns. Well, the trick there was you had to be assigned to a candidate that was going to be around for a while. So I was fortunate enough, I got selected to be on the campaign detail. Went to Washington, did the training, met my team. And at the end, they told us who our candidate was going to be. Frankly, I was a little disappointed. I mean, he was a governor from a southern state. He had some PR issues. But I remember I was actually working the day shift that first day we picked him up. I'll never forget, February 17th, 1992. I accompanied the detail leader up to the hotel room, knocked on the door. William Jefferson Clinton answered the door, and we were off and running. Well, the way the campaigns worked back then, we worked 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. I figured, well, we'll get one rotation out of this. So I did my first 3 weeks, and I went home, and I figured, well, that's probably it. Well, 3 weeks later, they called us out for a second rotation. I went out for the second rotation, cleared that, and I thought, okay, surely that's it, we're done. Well, they called us out, and about midway through the third rotation, it dawned on me. They're going to elect this guy. Well, you know the history. President Clinton went to Washington, became our 42nd president. I went back to Chicago to my duties in the office. My next opportunity came in the fall of '97. Now, when I joined the service, I wanted to be on the president's detail. That was my end goal. And I was fortunate enough in '97 to be selected. So once again, packed up, transferred to Washington. Now, The fall of 97, spring of 98 was a very interesting time around the White House. Again, there were some PR issues. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, come talk to me later. But I did my first year as a shift agent, doing the standard things that you see Secret Service agents do. At the end of my first year, it was time to transfer into what we call a satellite detail. Now, back then, the options were you could either go to the family detail, where you would protect the First Lady and any of the kids. You could go to the transportation section, where you could drive the limos and do the motorcade advances. Or you could go to the counter-assault team. That was the tactical unit, where you dressed in black BDUs, played with automatic weapons, and ran around mock cities preventing ambushes. Okay, being the overgrown juvenile, it wasn't difficult to decide which way I went. I spent 2 years with the tactical unit, and that took us through the 2000 election. With the 2000 election, we had a new administration, and it was time for me to transfer back to the main shift and start working on my third phase, which is where you do your advance work. Well, advances kind of progress. You start off with what we considered low-level advances, where you would kind of do airports, arrivals, and departures. Then you transition into something called an RON, and this is where you basically cover an event where the president or the protectee is going to spend the night, usually a hotel. In my case, it happened to be the G8 summit in Genoa, Italy, and it was a hotel on the harbor surrounded on 3 sides by water. As you can imagine, that brought some unique challenges. I put together a plan, actually involved military assets, being on the water. You can imagine which assets those were. But one of the things that I included in that was something called the Navy Mammal Program. Dolphins in the water. I thought it was brilliant. Unfortunately, the Italian government disagreed. They frowned on my plan somewhat. That's a story for another time. But we accomplished the mission. We got it done. They came and left, all secure. A couple of months after that, my big opportunity came. I was going to get an opportunity to do a lead advance. Now, a lead advance is where you cover everything. Motorcades, agents, tactical units, the whole 9 yards. I was very excited. So I put together my team, and we traveled down to the location, advanced it. It was going to be a 2-day advance, an overnight stay. President came in the first night, all good, nice and quiet, put him to bed, no issues. Next morning we got up early. President liked to get up early and run. Took him for a run, beautiful morning. September 11th, 2001. Our first stop was going to be a grade school. We arrived at the grade school, and the president immediately went into hold for a few minutes. I led the group in, brought the president into the first classroom. As the president was sitting there with the kids, I was actually in an adjacent classroom with the press secretary, Ari Fleischer. Well, as I'm sure you've seen on television, as the president's chief of staff, Andy Card, approached the president and spoke with him right about the same time, one of Mr. Fleischer's assistants ran into our room and said, "A second one is hit, and it looks like a terrorist attack." I hadn't obviously been watching the television. I grabbed Mr. Fleischer and I said, "Excuse me?" He explained to me that 2 planes had flown into the World Trade Center in New York City, and obviously we were under attack. When we arrived at the school, we were supposed to be there for an hour. I knew that was going to change. I ran outside and grabbed my motorcade agent. Now, this was, again, a typical presidential motorcade. 25 cars, ambulances, you name it. He thought he had an hour to get that flipped around and rearranged. I told him he had about 10 minutes, if my guess was right. And we were going to be going back to the airport, I suspected. I also told him that if it was what I thought, this was not going to be your typical presidential slow roll to the airport. We were going to get there in a hurry, and I didn't want to see anybody between here and the airport. Well, I walked back into the classroom. At that point, we led the president to the library. He made the statement to the nation that the gentleman referred to. And as I suspected, they said, okay, let's go. Going back to the airport, we're going wheels up. Now, I got to give those state troopers a lot of credit. We got there in a hurry. I think that big limousine left the ground a time or two. I think we even had close air support, if I'm not mistaken. Right about the time we arrived at the airport, the group offloaded the motorcade, started up the stairs, and I see the mill aide running towards me. Most of you are familiar with the mill aide carrying the football. When you see the mill aide running, it is not a good thing. He ran up to me and told me that the Pentagon had been hit. Now, I think most of us have been in a situation where all of a sudden your vision narrows, you recognize the intensity of the situation. I knew what had happened in New York was bad. But the information relayed to me now is this is national. This is across the country. We don't know where the next hit's coming. And unfortunately, I've got the President of the United States in a gas can in the middle of an open airfield. We were getting a lot of vague information. Back then, you guys are going to find this hard to believe, those younger ones of you, we didn't have cell phones. We were operating on pagers that you could communicate with. And we were getting a lot of erroneous information. Car bombs going off in DC. Obviously, the Pentagon had been hit. Upper management of the Secret Service most definitely did not want to take the president back to Washington at this point in time. So there was a debate going on. My opinion was, I don't care where you go, just go. Well, they finally went wheels up, and at that point, I knew wherever they were going, they weren't going to have support because nobody knew. And I started screaming and stamping, saying, I've got it all. I've got motorcade vehicles. I've got agents. I've got tactical people. Get me a plane. Unfortunately, every plane in the country had been grounded, including the military. Well, at the end of the day, by the time they finally got a plane to me and we got loaded up, the president had made his stops in Louisiana and Nebraska and was already on his way home. We went wheels up, landed about 10 minutes after the president. And then, of course, that evening, you saw his address to the nation. A couple of months after that, the country created what's called Department of Homeland Security. They gathered a handful of agents, including myself. We created the new Secretary of Homeland Security security detail, and I did that for the next couple of years with a stint in headquarters, and finally got out of Washington, D.C., and transferred to Birmingham, Alabama, where I retired as the agent in charge of Alabama and Mississippi. That's my story. But what I would ask you is on this day, let's remember the men and women who were the real heroes. The men and women who ran into those buildings. And the men and women who, as a result of this day, signed up for the military and went over and paid the ultimate sacrifice. Let's always keep them in our prayers. Let's always remember. Thank you for your time.
You would rise, please, for the playing of taps. Thank you for your attendance and attention. This concludes the ceremony.